All right. Welcome to True Leaf Market's Dig In, our monthly live stream where we dig into various gardening topics that apply to our customers. My name's Haley. This is Ashley, and today we're going to get to know the woman behind asking all the questions every time we do this. Well, thanks, Ashley, for being on the other side, letting us get to know you a little bit more.
Thank you for having me.
Awesome, thanks. Let's start with the basics. Tell us a little bit about, where you went to school. What did you study?
Yeah, so I went to BYU, Idaho, and studied horticulture. So that is what my bachelor degree is in. And I've been working here, using it and being able to help teach other people a little bit about my passion of gardening.
You definitely impress me every day. So putting that degree to work. Tell me a little bit about school. Was there like a cool project you worked on that was like one of your, favorite accomplishments or something?
Yeah, so I got to do a lot of really fun projects. My passion is really in the growing plant side of things. Horticulture is kind of divided up into 3 different segments. So you have the growing of plants, designing with plants, and then maintaining plants. So one of my favorite projects was actually building a hydroponic system. We built it was a wall that hung in a greenhouse. And then we would have the water that would flow kind of like a ladder through it and deliver the nutrients. And then it would just cycle back to the top. It was really fun to build and kind of design it from, the very start.
Sounds like a Rube Goldberg machine, but for plants.
Kind of something like that.
Very cool. Well, tell us like a little bit more about like what you do on a day-to-day basis at True Leaf.
Yeah, so here at True Leaf Market, I've spent the past few years mostly as the managing editor. So I handled a lot of, creating product pages and improving our product pages, as well as creating informational sources so that people could learn how to grow the plants and the seeds that we sell. But most recently, I am working more on the product side of things. So managing what products we offer, bringing in new products, diversifying things so that our customers continue to have new things to select from and, to create different exciting projects in their gardens.
Very cool. Well, that's what we're here to talk today about is bulbs. We haven't had bulbs on our product list for very long. It is somewhat new for us. It's been, is this year 3?
2 or 3.
2 or 3, yeah. Mm-hmm. So they're still new to us, and you have some great points and some notes to make about different types of bulbs. We've kind of looked into some common questions that we get from our customers, and so start by telling us the different types.
Yeah, so when people think of bulbs, they usually think of the traditional bulb, which is usually kind of round, hard. They're going to be things like tulips, daffodils, hyacinth, and bulbs are actually a modified stem, and so they have all these different layers inside of them, kind of like an onion, where all of the nutrients is stored. But as you look through our bulb category page, you're going to see a few other different types of we call them bulb products, but they include things like corms and tubers, as well as some rhizomes. So corms are a little different in that they are actually a swollen stem base that is dried. So when you get them, they look like little shriveled up, just like rock kind of pieces, I guess you could say.
Almost like roots you dig up in the ground or something that just look a little scraggly.
So they look a little different. They're still round. They're about this big. But they're just super wrinkled, and then when you plant them, you soak them, they kind of hydrate a little bit.
Oh, okay.
But then they would grow into a flower. So some popular corms include anemones.
Okay.
Those are things, you plant just like any other bulb, but they look a little bit different. And then we also have tubers, which most people are familiar with potatoes as tubers. So they are an enlarged fleshy stem, but then they're going to have a little blossoming spot or an eye. So this is, when you plant potatoes, you want to make sure they have a little eye.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. And then there's also rhizomes, which are just underground horizontal stems. So most people, when they hear rhizomes, they're going to think of things like asparagus or strawberries, things that are going to spread a little bit.
Yeah, asparagus is what comes to mind for me. One of those, long-term kind of weird-looking root things. Mm-hmm. Well, that's really interesting that there's so many different types, and thanks for trying to describe way to identify these, especially if you're just digging up in your garden and you're like, well, what is this? I do that all the time, and I find little tulip bulbs, and then there's ones that I would never know are actually supposed to grow.
Yep.
So based on these different varietals, we've got customers buying bulbs at certain times during the year. So when is the best time for them to purchase these, and what kind of process can they expect when they're buying from True Leaf?
Yeah, so when to purchase them really just depends on the customer. So here at True Leaf Market, we offer pre-orders because we ship our bulbs out kind of all at the same time when they're best to be planted. However, this can vary, from zone to zone a little bit, or even with year to year. Here it can depend on just how cold is our spring, and that can vary a little bit. And so it just depends on the customer and when they want to plant. But as far as purchasing, you can purchase them as soon as they're available, and then they'll be shipped out, at that best time to ship them.
Great. So we're shipping everything to our customers as soon as they become available. We're always trying to make sure everybody gets the freshest product, right? Let's see, why don't we, why is like a pre-order the best option for our customers on a year-to-year basis? Why are they not buying them in the middle of summer?
Yeah, so bulbs, as we sell seeds can be stored for a really long time. You can store them for years, multiple years. There's even places that store them for hundreds of years, to keep in seed banks, throughout the world. They use them for research. But bulbs, they have a much shorter shelf life, you could say. So they are, very living. They're something that you really want to grow every single year. They're going to need access to the soil, take up nutrients, and they can be stored for a while, but then they really want to continue to be grown. They're not something that you want to just keep on your shelf for 2 years. And so we want to make sure that when we ship things out, that we're shipping them when they're supposed to be planted, within a few weeks. Right? So if someone, gets them ahead of time, you can still store them, but we don't want to keep them on our shelves here at True Leaf Market for months and months and months while they're losing their quality, and just, we don't want to send them out when they're not going to be, the best time for our customers to be growing them. We want to send a product that is fresh and vibrant and will continue to produce as they're grown.
So we've definitely taken shipping times into account when we get in these different varieties of bulbs, because it's in their best interest, right? So This is usually you're going to be planting within a few weeks when you receive your order, not when you place the order, which can be at any time during the year. But it shows up.
There is maybe like one exception. We do offer anemones in the fall, where depending on your zone, the spring may be best to plant those. But because, again, anemones are corms, they're going to be dry already. So there's something you really can store very, very easily throughout the winter and then plant in the spring, no problem at all.
Okay, it's good that there's the one exception. So that being talking about anemones, what about the other types of bulbs? Like, when are the best times to, plant? What are we planting in the fall, and what are we planting in the spring? And, what should they purchase?
Yeah, bulbs really fall into kind of 3 categories. So you're going to have your fall planted bulbs, and fall planted bulbs are going to be those flowers that are going to sprout in the spring. And the reason you plant them in the fall is because they usually need a cold period to be able to bloom. So for example, tulips you want to plant in the fall, they're going to get a period of several weeks of cold. So we're talking like 12 weeks. And this is kind of their environmental trigger that helps them to bloom in the spring. As the temperatures warm up and they've had that cold period, it's kind of like we were talking earlier.
Nap.
Yeah, like you said, like a nap.
It's a cold dirt nap.
So it's that time where their roots can start to establish a little bit, even when it's colder, soil's warmer, and roots can still grow. So it allows them to kind of get established a little bit towards the end of fall, and then just continue to grow slowly during the winter, so that they're all ready to go and bloom early in the spring, a lot of times earlier than most other things are going to be growing and blooming.
So that misconception of fall bulbs is really your spring garden. So you're planting in the fall to get, the benefits when the winter's over.
Exactly. So it's kind of, right when you're itching to come out of those winter blues, bulbs are the perfect thing to have to, welcome you into spring.
That's why I think so many people like spring, is that you get all those first, and that's when you get the most vibrant colors too, is springtime.
And then in addition, right after you get your fall bulbs planted, you can also plan for some things to grow inside that are going to help brighten your home during those winter months. And those include bulbs that can be grown as houseplants. So these are things like amaryllis. Amaryllis is super popularly grown to be blooming during Christmas.
I always get them as Christmas presents, which I love. Everybody, you can please keep giving them to me.
And then they're also grown for Valentine's Day. So, they can be grown to target bloom during those certain time periods just based on when you plant them. So.
Well, and they have they're most commonly like pink, white, and red, right? So that's you got your Christmas and your Valentine's.
Yep, perfect.
Yeah.
And then you can also grow paper whites indoors. So those are some bright white flowers that, just add a little bit of cheer during, any of the winter months. They're perfect. You can also grow them kind of traditionally in soil, but they are also fun to grow in water. So you can grow them with some pebbles and then fill it up with
like
water.
A hydroponic. Very cool.
Yeah.
You should get one of these. Let's grow one this winter.
Yeah, we'll try it.
Yeah.
And then, after your winter houseplant type bulbs, then you're going to come around to your spring bulbs that you'll want to plant early in the spring so that you can have those summer into fall blooms.
Okay. What kind of what types of bulbs would you be planting? Like, is it just can you get tulips that would grow in the fall, or is it spring only, or are there just spring bulbs that are gonna have your summer and fall blooms only?
So the way we sell them, we're gonna sell your fall planted stuff in the fall, and then it'll ship to you in the fall. And then our spring bulbs, so things like gladiolus, begonias, those will ship to you in the spring. But there is kind of something fun that you can do with bulbs to make them grow kind of in an off season, and that's called forcing. So that's when so things that you would plant in the fall that need a cold period, you could actually stick it in the fridge for a while. We're talking several weeks again. Get it that cold period that it needs.
We're tricking that little winter nap.
Exactly.
Okay.
And then when you pull them out and then you plant them, as they're in a warmer environment, and that's going to kind of trigger them to wake up and to start growing and blooming.
Very cool. Well, when it comes to planting in the fall or the spring, tell us what we're looking at when we're putting the bulb in the ground, getting our hands dirty.
Yeah, so a lot of people ask about, how deep should I plant my bulbs? And this can vary from bulb to bulb because they're different sizes. So a good just general rule to follow is that you want to plant a bulb about 2 to 3 times deeper than that bulb's height is.
Okay. Yeah, all right. That's a pretty good, pretty simple rule of thumb.
Yeah.
And I imagine that we have instructions and stuff on our site when it comes to whichever variety you've purchased. So
Yep,
if there is any different or asterisk.
Yep, so we always include planting directions on all of our bulb products. It's also super easy to look up. There's a lot of different resources, including we have a How to Grow Bulbs page that you're welcome to reference on our website to get a little bit of information for any of the bulbs that you might be growing.
Is this that moment where we'll link it down below later?
Yep,
Yeah.
it'll be linked below.
Very nice. See, you guys do an awesome job. I'm so happy to be a part of it. Let's talk about, let's see, you said the planting depth, and what about how do you know if you're planting it upright? Or not on its side or upside down?
Yeah, that's something where most bulbs are going to have a little bit of a pointed end, like a teardrop shape. So that pointed part is going to be what you want to orient towards the top. That's going to be closer to the surface level. And then the roots will often just be there'll be a central point where the roots will come out. They might be dried or, kind of brushed off through the bulb, packaging process. And that's totally fine. But that's the point where you're going to want to have facing downwards. And, and again, bulbs, they're not that picky. It's not if you don't have it perfectly upright, it's not going to grow. If it's tipped a little bit, it's totally okay.
They can adapt
Yeah.
a little bit. They're hardy. I mean, you're alive during the winter. You got to be a little hardy, right? Yeah.
A little resilient.
Well, so tell us about what our care for these bulbs is going to be after we've gone through that, beautiful flowering spring. We've got to see all the pinks and reds and all the, these crazy cool colors that you can get. Yeah, what's the next care step?
Yeah, so general maintenance for bulbs is going to be, you're gonna sit back, relax all winter if you're planting them in the fall. And then once they come up in the spring or in the summer, you're gonna enjoy their blooms. And then you'll just watch for once those blooms start to wear out a little bit, get a little bit rugged, you can go ahead and clean them up and cut off the blooms, but you do wanna be careful not to cut off the leaves just yet. So bulbs, they bloom really early because they have all the stored nutrients inside of them and all these layers within the bulbs. And so you want to allow them to recuperate that once they use it up to produce these beautiful blooms. So you're going to leave the leaves out and about so they can gather light, the roots can continue to gather nutrients. And then later on in the fall, once everything's starting to kind of die back, you'll want to clean those up, cut down the leaves at that point. And then another common thing we get asked about is fertilizer. Everyone's wondering, when do you fertilize? And so you want to be careful not to, throw a bunch of fertilizer on early in the spring because, you're going to get a lot of foliage development, maybe not necessarily flower bloom development, if it's just overpowered by nitrogen. But you can give a little bit of fertilizer when you're planting, but you really want to make sure you give some fertilizer about midsummer when your bulbs are really trying to recuperate that nutrients again. And so you want to
recharge their little solar batteries, essentially.
Yeah.
Okay.
So you're just going to give them a little source of food as they're, getting really hungry and trying to pack it away for the coming year.
Food and vitamin D. All right. That's pretty easy. All right. Just about timing. Gotcha. Let's see. What about people who don't necessarily live in our Utah climate? I mean, we've got all these different regions. Are there any kind of little caveats to people growing in other states?
Yeah, so with growing in different regions, there's always something to consider, whether it's weather or other factors. But when it comes to bulbs, you really want to consider the soil that you're growing in. So when it comes to different regions, there's a big difference between growing, in the east and the south, or even the Pacific Northwest from more of our western states like Utah. Here in Utah and along with the other western states, we have really alkaline soils. Versus in the eastern parts and south and Pacific Northwest, soils tend to be a lot more acidic.
And so opposite pH.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so you want to kind of balance that out by applying something called agricultural lime. And that's going to help put your soil in the better pH range to support your bulbs as they're, wanting to take up nutrients and growing. It just allows them to really reach the nutrients that they need in the soil when the pH is at the right range.
And one thing I always tell my customers, if you have more questions about this specific nuance when it comes to soil, every state or county is going to have a local agriculture extension, and they are growing in your area, and they've already messed with all of this, and they'll tell you exactly what you might need to do to make sure you have success. If you've tried to grow bulbs before and it didn't work out, they probably know why, and they'll tell you what to do to fix it. So
just to add on with that, yeah, I just want to add on, a lot of people, you say call an extension office, and I know nowadays a lot of people don't like calling, but a lot of these extension offices, they have a wonderful website that's full of great resources that are still directed towards your local area. So for example, here we use Utah State. Utah State has a fantastic gardening section of their extension website that you can find information specific for bulbs or even specific vegetables. So no matter what, your extension service is going to be one of your best sources of information.
Well, and the best part about them is that the people running these sites and then picking up the phone are so passionate about what they're doing. They want to talk about it. You're not calling a collect number or a customer service rep that might be like, you know what, I'll help you out later, or it's just my job. They actually are passionate about growing and gardening. And, I've had customers say that they make longtime friends at their ag extension. It's fun.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, especially if you're just as passionate, right? So let's talk about, since we're giving everybody a resource, what would you recommend if something's going wrong, like if the bulbs haven't bloomed or, you know, yeah, what's wrong? What could we have done better?
Yeah, so there's a few common errors that people make, and so if you're planting your bulbs and they're not coming up in the spring, or something's obviously wrong, number one, you may want to consider, did you plant too shallow? Especially when you're planting fall bulbs, having them at the right depth can be vital to having some root development during that off season, because they're down low enough that they're protected from that bitter cold, while also having some drainage so they're not getting too wet. As the snow melts off, they're not rotting before they have a chance to get growing. So consider, are you planting too shallow? So look at the right depth recommendations for that specific bulb that you're growing. And then something else you want to consider is just in general, are you following the recommendations? Always before you're planting, check out what am I supposed to be doing for this bulb first, and then follow the whole planting process.
Okay. So what are other devices are there about caring for bulbs? Like, can we handle the bulbs at like any time during the season? Can you replant them and move them to a different corner of your yard? When is that okay and when is it not okay?
Yeah, so you want to follow certain patterns. So in the spring, if you're growing something that multiplies, so things like irises, that was something I was always in charge of as a kid, helping maintain in my grandma's garden. So your irises are going to continue to multiply year after year, and there's a point where they just become too overcrowded. That's another thing people make mistakes about, is just not ever thinning out your bulbs once they reach a certain point. And so in the spring, that's a great time to go through, divide them, thin them out, give them a little elbow room so that they can continue to grow and develop and just produce prolific blooms. But you can also do it, you can want to make sure you're cutting things back in the fall. So if you really want to thin out, then you could do that too.
Okay, so you had irises, tulips, daffodils, and hyacinths are all ones that are dividable. Or ones that you want to thin out to keep room for new growth.
Yeah, typically things in the fall, I feel like you can plan on wanting to just keep an eye out after a few years and make sure that they still have enough room.
My neighbors grow daylilies and they thin them out every year, and it's just, sometimes it's like a giant jungle brush. I don't even know how they get in there to dig them up. And I just they sprout behind my planter boxes, against like between fences, and don't know how to get them out, but they are in abundance.
Yeah, and one of the main reasons I say, your fall bulbs are the ones you primarily want to look out for is that they're the ones that need the cold period, and so you can just leave them in all year long. But things that are, prefer the warmer temperatures, so more of your summer bloomers, you're going to want to even consider lifting them in the fall so that you can protect them from that super cold period.
Oh, okay, interesting. So what about, at the end of the cycle, what are our storage options? When do we leave it in the ground? When can we store them in-house? What are the differences there?
Yeah, so generally bulbs, because they hold on and pack away nutrient storage, you can pull them out of the ground and they're going to be just fine. You just want to make sure that you prepare them correctly for storage by allowing them to dry a little bit. So you can just leave them, if you have a protected patio area somewhere that's maybe not direct sunlight, has a cover or some shade, let them dry out a bit, dust off the extra soil off of them. And then you want to put them in something like a cardboard box, something that's going to be dry, but still kind of breathable. And then you want to keep them somewhere cool. So ideally somewhere like a basement where they're going to be
like
kept cool,
your classic
not
cellar
hot.
storage, for your preserves and
Think of like when you store potatoes.
Potatoes and onions.
Yeah, they can store they have a pretty long shelf life, but there's a point where they'll also rot. If they're closed off, they have access to too much moisture. Yeah. So it's the same idea for flower bulbs. Really, is that you just want to keep them dry, keep them cool, and keep them out of sunlight.
Very cool. Well, let's see. What about the differences with the bare roots. We were talking about that earlier, how some people can kind of get confused about the difference between the two.
So you're talking as far as like storage kind of a thing?
Yeah, like, and
Yeah.
any confusion that comes with the differences between the two, I guess.
Yeah, so bare roots are something that you really don't want to store for a really long time. However, you can kind of temporarily store them if you receive them, say, before you're ready to plant, which is something some of our customers do face because we do ship them as soon as we are able to. You may get them a little early, and let's say your spring is running a bit colder than normal or a bit colder than some other zones, and you're just not ready to plant yet. You can go ahead and actually take your bare roots and just create a temporary home for them by either having like a bucket with some soil, and you can literally just kind of toss them in, toss some soil over them. Because soil is such a great moisture moderator, it's going to help those roots to have access to moisture without being completely soaked, right? You don't really want to spray them down with a hose. I'd say you could dip your bare roots first and then just kind of put them in some moderately dry soil. You can just use potting soil, potting mix, coco coir. Those are all great options. And it just allows them to kind of stay dormant for a few more weeks. And then once you're ready to plant, you'll just take them out, shake off that excess soil that's sticking to them, and then plant them in the location that you actually want to grow them in.
Oh, okay. That's good to know. You mentioned like growing was it irises with your grandma? Are there any other bulbs that are your favorite, or you plant in your own garden that you'll never live without?
I love bulbs because you can plant them ahead of time. So like you can plant them in the fall, and then it's just like a nice surprise, and it's a good way to get an early spring garden without feeling like I'm putting in a lot of work in the early spring when I'm trying to start all my things indoors and get ready to transplant later. But I love irises and tulips and grape hyacinth. So those are the little guys.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, but I love to plant in mass. So, I feel like a lot of people, they just plant a few bulbs here and there. But for me, the real, vibrance and the real power of bulbs is when you plant them in mass. You get that beautiful floral show that comes on. So I just think people should plant more bulbs to really get that wow factor from them.
Yeah, I got lucky that my yard came, like every year they come up and surprise me, but there's one corner that's full of forget-me-nots. So you get the beautiful little blue flowers, and then all these yellow tulips will come up right in between them. So it's this really nice blue and yellow that play off of each other, and it lasts for quite a while. And I'd say that's one of my favorite parts of my garden, and I'm not even the one that planted it, but just get to reap all the benefits, which is, I think, why bulbs are cool. The set it and forget it method is really cool. And it definitely is a way to not feel like you have to go sweat through spring without, little to no reward. You just kind of get to enjoy it there at the beginning.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's great. Is there anything else you can think of adding? You gave us a ton of knowledge today, which I'm sure is all in some of our blogs, and, we'll make sure that's readily available for anybody watching this. But if you've got any closing remarks?
I think it's just get planning.
Yeah.
Plan out your garden. If you haven't decided on some fall bulbs that you want to grow, go ahead and get some planned. You can make pre-orders on our website so that they're ready to go as soon as those are made available.
I agree. And we have all that information for you on our site, and our customer service reps are happy to answer any questions you might have too. So, why not try, right? Take a stab at it. But even if it's your first time, we'll help you succeed.
Yep. Well, thanks for joining us.
Yeah. Everyone have a great day.